Well-kept secrets from past events can linger in the public psyche for decades and even centuries, at times emerging in media exposés or tell-all biographies. If not told, they become unsolved puzzles, historical mysteries which at times have had shocking consequences. And sometimes these mysteries will remain unsolved because the one person who knows the truth has taken it with them to the grave. This is the first in our series of secrets taken to the grave. The following are 3 intriguing true stories that give another side to tragic incidents that occurred in the past. Number 3. Charles Lightoller. The horrific sinking of the Titanic in the North Atlantic Sea in April 1912 saw the loss of over 1,500 lives, with many theories emerging since then about the actual cause of the disaster. Second Officer Charles Lightoller was the ship's only senior officer who survived, and later gave evidence during an official inquiry into the tragedy. His granddaughter, writer Louise Patten, has claimed that Lightoller lied at the hearings and told the real story only to his wife, her grandmother Sylvia, in a novel based on this family's secret. On the night the massive luxury liner catastrophically hit the iceberg, Lightoller was not on duty, but he was soon to hear about the events from his superiors, Captain Edward Smith and First Officer William Murdoch. A complicating factor during that moment in history was that sailors were still learning and acquiring a new steering procedure which, with the gradual change from sail to steam power, was the opposite of previous methods. So when Quartermaster Robert Hitchens was given the hard starboard order by Murdoch, who had spotted the iceberg, he reacted in confusion and panic and mistakenly steered towards rather than away from it. Hitchens' action was immediately corrected, but loss of those 2 vital minutes meant that it was too late to avoid the looming iceberg. However, Lightoller's later confession to his wife directly implicated Bruce Ismay, who is chairman of White Star Line, the company which owned the Titanic. Ismay's main concern was the value of his investment and the company's reputation, so he convinced the captain to continue the voyage rather than await help from a nearby ship, which was only 4 hours away. The decision to forge ahead hastened the intake of water into the ship's damaged hull and its rapid sinking, whereas a complete halt would have seen it continue to float until rescuers arrived. Patten claims that her grandfather was forced by Ismay to lie at the official inquiries, denying that several ice warnings had been received, or that he had spoken to other senior officers after the liner struck the iceberg. Ismay threatened the ship's crew with loss of their jobs, as the company would be disgraced and bankrupted. As a result, Patten claims her grandfather was torn between conflicting ethical codes and ultimately participated in the cover-up to protect her employer and fellow crew. She has said that there is now no one still living who can be harmed by these revelations, but equally there was also no one alive nearly 100 years later to confirm they are true. Number 2. Esma Millicent Livingston. The riches to rags descent of the so-called Lady of the Swamp ended in a tragic unsolved murder in southern Australia in 1852. The suspect's wife, Esma Millicent Livingston, may well have taken that secret to a grave in 1993. The victim, Margaret Clement, was born into wealth, and on her father's death, she and her sister Jeannie purchased a cattle farm called Tullaree in rural Gippsland, Victoria. With their brother Peter and 11 staff managing the property, the sisters lived an affluent lifestyle, entertaining high-class guests with parties serving gourmet food and furnishing the mansion with exotic purchases from their overseas trips. The 2 sisters even attended Buckingham Palace in London and were presented at court to British monarch King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra. However, when Peter left to fight in World War I, the sisters, who knew little about farm management, saw a decline in their fortunes. Dishonest farm managers sold off good cattle and replaced them with poor quality stock, looters broke in and rustled animals, pastures were neglected and not properly irrigated. Eventually, the property was flooded and invaded by blackberry bushes. After a protracted dispute over a mortgage deal and Jeannie's death in 1950, Margaret was befriended by a neighbouring couple, Esma and Stanley Livingston. Stanley was a former Melbourne footballer, very strong, but also with a known violent streak. At this stage, Margaret was living in waist-high swampland without gas, electricity or tank water, and wearing only her tattered finery. In a shock move, Margaret sold Tullery to Stanley Livingston on the condition that he build a cottage for her. However, she was never to live in it, disappearing in May 1952. 1 week after, a dog had been found with his throat slashed. Livingston later sold the property for nearly 8 times his purchase price. But in 1978, human bones were found in a small grave near the Clements Old land. There was also nearby a handbag, a tattered shawl, a spade and a hammer. Police suspected that Livingston had killed Margaret and then arranged for 2 Melbourne men to conceal her remains. As he had also grazed cattle in that area at one time, they theorised that Livingston used the herd to flatten the ground over her grave. Esma Livingston had also disclosed to at least 4 people at various times that her husband had murdered Margaret. However, she told police that she was too scared to talk. At the inquest, Livingston denied involvement and he was never charged. But when he died in October of 1992 of cardiac arrest, the police decided to reopen the case and were preparing to again ask Esma Livingston for assistance in resolving the cold case. But she died in a nursing home soon after in 1993, before the police could approach her. Number 1. John Demjanjuk. Was Don Demjanjuk Ivan the Terrible, a sadistic Nazi war criminal and mass murderer, or the victim of mistaken identity? The last 30 years of his life were a litany of charges and investigations, during which he consistently denied every allegation. A Ukrainian by birth, Demjanjuk was drafted into the Red Army and claimed to have become a prisoner of war in Crimea in 1942. 10 years later, he migrated to the United States, changing his first name from Ivan to John. However, he was tracked down by Nazi hunters and identified by 11 Holocaust survivors as Ivan the Terrible, a notorious guard at the Treblinka death camp, who operated the diesel engines which supplied gas to the death chambers. As a result, Demjanjuk was extradited to Israel in 1986, where he stood trial for crimes against humanity and was sentenced to death. However, in 1993, the Israeli Supreme Court overturned his conviction based on other evidence. For example, that he was almost 10 years younger than the said Ivan the Terrible, and that ID used as evidence had been forged by the Soviet KGB. While the Israelis still believed Demjanjuk to have been a Nazi prison guard, they were legally unable to retry him due to the principle of double jeopardy. He returned home to Cleveland, Ohio, only to have his US citizenship revoked in 2001 after further investigations. In 2009, he was deported to Germany, where he faced trial in Munich. The German prosecution alleged that Demjanjuk had volunteered to become a member of the SS after he was captured, as many Ukrainian soldiers had done to avoid POW death camps. Again, forged documents and unreliable witness statements were used as evidence, and his previous lawyer discredited the proceedings as a show trial for the purpose of deflecting blame from Germany. In essence, no living person had seen Demjanjuk commit the crimes of which he was accused. In May 2011, after protracted trial proceedings, Demjanjuk was convicted of being an accessory to the murder of the 27,900 people who had died at the Sobibor camp in Nazi-occupied Poland. He died, aged 91, in a German nursing home while the case was under appeal. So under German law, died an innocent man, and the only person who truly knew the extent of his guilt.